Today I've got the second part of my conversation with Justin Gray. If you missed the first part, I'll put a link down below along with links to all of Justin's stuff so that you can go and check him out. For someone who wants to get into doing more on the immersive recording side of things, but they're not in a position where they can build a big, 704 array, where's a good place for them to start getting into doing immersive recording so that they can kind of start getting some of the benefits of doing that approach to things and then scale up more in the future?
Yep. I think starting with a pair of either omnidirectional or bidirectional mics that are nice. When we start to get into any sort of ambient recording, right? Not close mic sources, noise floor is a big deal and tonality is a big deal. So I did use it's Neumanns and DPAs and Sheps and Millennias and Ferns and Neves and beautiful gear. It makes a difference. That said, a pair. You close mic the sources as you would normally close mic the sources to get them to sound as beautiful as possible with whatever your thing is. And even just starting with a pair of microphones and then experimenting with the idea of, okay, if my source, let's say, is in the front, just like we were talking about with the bass effect, where can you place the stereo pair to get yourself some rear reflections? Start there. Then think about, well, what if I want it on the side? Well, suddenly pointing the microphones like this doesn't make so much sense. That's why I use a lot of bidirectional mics facing sideways for side surround content. Just experiment with capturing a source not to put on top of the close mics, to put somewhere else. There's an amazing engineer and researcher named Will Howie. Will is he was at McGill for a long time here in Canada as a assistant professor or one of the faculty members. Eventually, he went and did a postdoctorate in spatial stuff for NKH 22.2, which is a 22.2 speaker format in Japan. He did postdoctoral research on recording techniques for it. I adore Will. I love the way he thinks. I love the way he approaches it. Something that him and I both agree on, and he's really pushed before, is walk around the room, find a place that sounds good, and stick a microphone there. So, who cares about arrays? Who cares? Arrays are great for certain things. If you're going to do an array, there's logic in having certain numbers of them. There's logic in mathematically placing them for time arrival, all that stuff. But there is also, and I did it a lot, hear your close source. Okay, again, let's say a new instrument. Let's say we're talking about a trumpet. Trumpet player is playing, you get your close mic positioned in a way that it sounds nice. Well, now walk around the space that you're in and find a place that you think sounds nice and would sound nice behind you. Don't think of it in front of you. Be like, if I'm the mix right now, what do I want? Well, you'll notice that at a certain point, the threshold of reflection to close source, to, direct sound, changes. You're like, okay, well, in the back corner, it's sort of dark and maybe a little bit bouncy, but actually over here, it's that sort of almost sounds like a room reverb. Stick a microphone there, then go and listen to it. And that's the start. That's the beginning of figuring out how to capture a room. And the key is that we cannot have rules here that are too stringent because the room changes, the source changes, everything changes. So what might sound nice in that place as a trumpet might be a complete waste of time for an acoustic guitar because an acoustic guitar is not nearly as loud as a trumpet. You might need to be way closer to that instrument if it's quiet. So it's all about just walking around with your ears, imagining what you want and placing microphones. So even if you have 4 microphones, you do your close source, you do 2 for your side surround microphones and 2 for your rear surrounds. Boom, you've got yourself, a 5-channel system. That is more than enough information to make a real impact in a mix.
That's cool. So, all right, so you were doing a lot of stuff with bidirectional mics. If you're walking around doing that, do you prefer to have the source because, you're trying to capture more room. Do you like having the source off axis then, so that you're really getting just the space, or do you find yourself getting more of what you want by still having the source of the sound on axis in the microphone?
Again, it depends on the size of the room. So maybe we describe the room I was in, because then that'll give the context. So the room I'm in is quite tall. It's like 28 feet tall or something along those lines. Nice, big, tall ceiling. Beautifully designed studio. Lovely wooden ceiling, lovely wooden walls. There's some glass as well, because there's a drum booth and there's obviously a mixing rooms on the other side of that glass. But great reflections, relatively tight. Like I would say like a 1 second kind of decay on the reverb. So it's crispy, but it's quick and it's fast. And that's nice. That's especially for how many layers I had. It turned out to be a real blessing that was the reality, because it didn't get muddy. I could layer a ton of stuff on top of itself. Noise floor was low. Another big deal, right? Further you get from the source, higher the noise floor is. So the noise floor is low, so I can get away. But I'd say I have to take a guess here. Like maybe it's about 35 long and maybe like 25 wide. So 35 feet. I mean, we're not talking about a cathedral here. We're talking about a nice studio floor, but not the biggest one you've ever seen. So let's say, for instance, I put the source. Let's take another source. Let's take electric guitar, which I did stereo amps in the room. So I've got close mics on them. Well, electric guitar can put out some serious volume. So if I put a pair of ribbon mics, let's say 10 or 15 feet back, I'm almost halfway into the room, and I face them towards them, they're going to sound like decently close stereo sources, right? So if I pan those to the side surround speakers, they're not that different from the amps. And then if I put another 10 to 15 feet back from there, I put a pair of, let's say, omnidirectional mics or another pair of ribbons. Those aren't going to sound that different from each other either. And so now I'm like, it's not decorrelated enough, because the reflections are all bouncing around, and it's like it doesn't create enough. So in that context, one reason that I didn't use the 11 channel array that I use a lot on things is for any source like electric guitar, like that's that loud, the 11 channel array got a little too diffuse too fast, because the reflections are just, it's not a cathedral. There's not enough difference between the different zones. And so the nice thing about ribbon mics, in this case, the Coles 4038s, first of all, they're nice and dark. So they're getting rid of a whole bunch automatically. They're just rolling off. Well, it's not that they're rolling them off, but they're not presenting the same amplitude for the high reflection content that is naturally going to be in the close mics on the amps. And then I do face them sideways so that the null point is at the amp. So what it's capturing is very different. It's sort of like MS times 2, right? But it's not MS in that they're not related that way. And you don't need to do it MS because they're going in different speakers. Suddenly, what it's picking up is only the sidewall. The microphone is actually doing a job for me that's impossible to do in nature. It's canceling sound from a direction. That's not how our ears work. We can't do that. So something like that is really functional. Now, when I get to the rear surround mics, which are, normally like a pair of Omnis, like let's say a pair of 4006s, or maybe another pair of Coles, like it depended. Now those are quite different than the close mics because they're 25 feet away. And the ones in the middle are different than both of them. Now we're talking. Now I've got some material to work with that's different, that I can sort of build tone around and build a sense of space in the mix.
That's cool. I need to see. The problem is I don't track much anymore, but I really want to mess around with some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I get if we can get this to be like my goal, making records, lovely. I'll do one again at some point, maybe in the next decade, but it is a hell of a task. I've been working on this for 4 years. I'm usually finishing other people's music, and I'm happy to be in that place, but I just couldn't help myself. I had to make this music. But I really do think that like I would, I'm looking forward to bringing that and bringing it into the ecosystem of all sorts of musical situations in a production role or an engineering role, so that when it comes time for the immersive mixes, we can be making some really intentional content that really that doesn't serve the music, that is the music. Like I just want it to actually be the thing. Will it happen every time? Again, it's whatever. There's no point in even considering whether it does or doesn't. But in this particular case, it was the only way to be able to create what the immersed record is.
Cool. Let's stay on your record for a bit. The first track that I really love, so there's the Tapestry one, that there is all this percussion stuff. Like it starts with, there's like a sweep across the front, I feel like, of something. And then it gets into all of this percussion, which is speaking my, drumming love language right there for me. Is there anything you want to talk about with that? Are there things that maybe when I go back and listen to this, because I know even after our conversation today, I'm going to go listen to that stuff again. What do you think people should listen for in there if they want to, we were talking about our own obsessiveness, and we go through and we're listening to things. I know, like in here, I have buttons on my monitor controller so that I can solo speakers up, and I don't use those when I'm mixing. I use them when I'm listening to stuff other people have done so that I can get ideas. What do you think are some cool ideas that people might want to grab from some of the stuff on the record?
So Tapestry is a good example of sometimes in Atmos and immersive, more is more. And again, someone could say, "Oh, the greatest songs ever written only needed a guitar and a vocal." You're right. You're right. But so am I. We're both right. And again, in this context, this is the music I wanted to create. And that is an honest representation of what it is that I want to make. So it is maximalism, right? It is full on. That song is holding back in no regard to be an aggressive immersive experience. That song is co-written by myself and the drummer on the track named Sean Rompre. We go way back. And we both have a fond experience listening to a record by Eamon Tobin called Foley Room together. Sick record. Eamon Tobin's an amazing electronic artist, many people might know. And Foley Room was all created with him doing these high-fidelity Foley recordings. Always loved the idea. Anyways, that was like a little spark for both of us. It's like, let's use Foley. Let's use various metallic sounds and such to be a part of the song. That was like one of the inspirations. So as you're listening to the intro, that stuff is like, there are hundreds and hundreds of recordings of forks, knives, tape measures, drills, bubble wrap, dropping metallic objects. I have these balls from China, these two balls where you're supposed to move them in your hand. I don't know what they're called, but they're sort of like a meditation kind of thing. And they have this awesome jingling sound. I recorded those and recorded them like many times with like close sheps, like very high fidelity recordings, and just orchestrated the crap out of it until it felt full beyond belief, playing little grooves, little patterns. It's an editing thing. And then I also used sound particles to then even further make some of them, like some of the shapes sort of sweep through a space. And so like that intro, at the end of it, like there's gotta be in the first 16 bars or 32 bars, depending how what tempo you think of it, you're probably hearing 1,000 pieces of recorded content. And they were all created a bit at a time, little this, a little bit of this, little fork thing here, this, and all placed specifically in speakers. And what I like about it is the concept of the groove in that moment not being anchored to anywhere, is that it's just a conversation that is moving around you. And actually, with maximalism, to a certain degree, there is that threshold. It's like when we track background vocals or guitars in the wall of sound. You get to that threshold where sometimes it gets smaller and then it gets bigger again. And so I wanted to push to that point where it just is like, there's so much. And then all of it, again, like no plugins. It's just all just careful little bits of automation over an intense amount of time, like way too much time. But whatever, it's my record and I took as much time as I allowed and I obsessed over it, and that's what we do. So that's a fun one to listen to. The next part of that song to check out is the guitar arrangement. I think is particularly fun. So Nick Tateshi's the guitarist. I wrote the melody on guitar, then he came in, played it beautifully with some sort of chord melody kind of stuff. I went to Nick's place a couple nights, and we orchestrated all of the little additional guitar layers, the little harmonies, the little things here, almost like pop vocals where you get like just a throw or just this or just that. And I orchestrated it, not always for 15 speakers, but like among the 906 orchestration with him being like, okay, now track a harmony, it's going to go in the left speaker. Track a harmony, it's going to go in the right speaker, just for that phrase. Like that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's all mixed pretty subtle, but actually the whole like guitar arrangement is as though you have access to like 10 to 15 guitarists all around you, all sort of chiming in. And I really had fun with that. And I think it's still like main guitar in the center channel, right? Because this record, there's a film. I mixed it with the idea of playing back in cinemas, which has happened and has been awesome. The center channel is a big deal on this record. It's very much a center channel soloist, center channel lead melody kind of album. I'm still telling that story, especially because there's a film that is associated with it. But I want every layer to do that. Another one is the drums. So this one's fun. The drummer, Sean, he came into the studio. We played together live. Then he went away. He took the drum tracks and turned them all into MIDI and started triggering some additional samples on top of the recorded drums from Superior Drummer. Well, we both realized Superior Drummer has an immersive library that George Massenburg recorded, and it is sick. It is so well done. So the big sort of stadium-style drums that come in halfway through the song, that is the augmentation of the drum set using only the ambient channels from Superior Drummer.
Interesting.
And like the height stuff they did in that big, because my studio, like the Humber studio wasn't that big. And I tried some reverbs and it started to feel too diffuse. So I went and we triggered every single note into the drum set, then mute the close sounds and only use their ambient mics on top of our close sounds. I think it turned out real well.
It did turn out real well. I mean, I think I think the record sounds great, and this is, you know, this is one of those things that's really interesting to me when it comes to immersive, because the musical style of your record, it's not something that I would normally gravitate towards listening to for fun, but I love listening to it in here in my Atmos setup for fun. Like it's kind of hard for me, you know, like on the one hand, it's like I want to listen to this and analyze the crap out of it and figure out all the stuff that you did, but it's really hard for me to do that because it has all of the feels kind of that I'm looking for, like to feel immersive in there. The one song, and I was mentioning this to you, the song, and I think it was the last single you put out, Pendulum. Pendulum has this, like, there's like a drum kind of, I hesitate to call it a break, but there's a point in the middle of the song where it kind of breaks down to, I think maybe there's some tabla going on in there, but there's also this snare drum stuff. And the way that snare drum feels in here, like the drums, it's almost like, gosh, I don't even know how to explain it because I felt immersed in the drums. And it's like, on the one hand, I kind of feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of drums, but I'm not sure if I am. And I don't really care. Like, it's like the details of this stuff. Like, I don't, like, I want to know, for me, because, when I hear that stuff, it's like, okay, that might be something I may want to steal at some point in time. But just for listening to it, it just feels really cool. That was one of the ones I had to pull the ADM into Pro Tools to, like, it's like, okay, which objects is this on? Because I want to hear, what does this stuff sound like if I just solo it up in there? And to be able to do that kind of stuff, that's, or go into my monitor controller and just like, okay, what's going on in the height channels here? And what's going on in the sides? Right. But that feeling, which is a lot of what we've been talking about, making things feel immersive, I think you nailed it. I mean, like, it feels immersive. The record is appropriately titled if people haven't listened to it.
Thank you. So the part there that I love the most is, I mean, of course the technology's there, and of course that's what we talk about, and of course it's like integrated into the very fabric of the music for me. But at the end of the day, I'm so happy to hear that it's music, right? Like this is music. And regardless of how it's experienced, that's why there's a stereo version of the record, is because I want the music to translate and to get to, the feels, to reach folks who want to hear it. But that snare drum thing. So, and this is the thing, is like, at basically every single stage of any moment in the record, I could probably describe something like this. Because I challenged myself to push the boundaries for myself, at least. So that moment is 13 different snare performances, 9 and 4. Marito Marks is the drummer on the track. So we did the drum performances. I actually just released the video about the immersive miking in his room, which was Coles and DPAs. It was like a basic, similar concept to what we just discussed, actually. Then I was like, okay, Marito, I've got this snare piece that I want to, sort of do this, like this classic sort of marching over the hill thing where it sort of fades up. And I want it to lead into the solo section. And then I also want it to be on the outro. Almost thinking of like that Bon Iver tune where, you get the big marching snares at the end. I mean, it's been in a lot of songs, right? The concept of the pop drum line marching up over the hill. It's a thing. So now this song's in 15 beats. It's really tricky. I had this pattern, and he plays so that's the pattern, and it's a composition that fits into 15 beats. So Marito at his studio has a lot of drums, and he has a sick collection. He's a great engineer. He records for people all around the world out of his studio. Turns out he has 13 snare drums. So we line them all up, and one at a time we put them on the stand. And we did 13 different performances on 13 different drums. And then I had tons of room mics already set up. And then what happens there is I mix one into the right surround. I mix the room mics for that one. I mix one into the center. I mix the room mics for that. So at the end of that, I mean, if we have 13 times, my guess is 2, 4 plus 7, 11. Let's say, for argument's sake, 10 microphones per snare. That's 130 channels of just for that snare moment. And I just go through and I just mix it all to be like, okay, so here's my close mics. The close mics are all there. Like, let me just bring it up and find that moment. And again, that's a moment where there's not a single plugin, no compression, no EQ, nothing. All that is a different snare drum in different channels, and then the room mics dispersed to create that feeling that you were describing. I mean, I say all that is. It's actually a pretty intense thing to do, but...
Right. So, I mean, aside from 130 channels of snare drum being what I would call a good start, what kinds of, with this album, you had a lot of tracks. Are there session management tips that you would love to give people, like, as things are scaling up, on the immersive side, how do you manage a session that's that large? Because there's a couple of things I see going on in there. Number one is just computing power, which, is getting better every day, but that's a lot of tracks
Not good enough
to deal with. And then, but beyond that, I'm just picturing the Pro Tools edit window and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. How do you manage, what advice would you give for people on how to manage large sessions like that?
So the first piece of advice, and like a little dose of reality, and I'm talking to another expert Pro Tools user. I'm an expert Pro Tools user. Like, I'm a professor in it. I've put in my 30,000, 40,000 hours in the program. I've recorded large-scale orchestras before. I've mixed film scores before. I've produced records over years and years. Like, this is not for the faint of heart, and it requires being on top of every single detail at every time. And if you make a mistake, it's a problem. So, like, there can't be, you can't. You make a mistake, you might have to backtrack some very, very awful steps. And honestly, they're the kinds of things where if you make the wrong mistake, you're probably just going to chuck those mics out, because the amount of work it would be to get back to that place, you'd be like, whatever, I'll just let them go. So it requires an obsessive understanding of how the program works. It requires folder structures. One of the hardest parts of this, computing aside, I had to use 2 computers for this record because it's all at 96K. And I'm using HDX, I'm using UAD plugins, I'm offloading as much as I possibly can. I do commit a lot of stuff. Again, committing with large groups like drums. One drum edit's 38 or 40 channels worth of stuff. Imagine having 2 drum sets on top of each other. There's 80 channels just there. You have the wrong group selected and you go for 10 minutes. You've made a hell of a mess for yourself, let alone playlisting. So it's hard, and it's hard. It's complicated. It requires an immense amount of focus, an immense attention to detail, and it just requires, this does require being an advanced Pro Tools user. The people who are on dub stages, who are the mix assistants, who are doing all that comform work, they're masters of this program. Try like early Atmos days of having to do conforms of multiple ADMs into one session with all the object automation, etc. Take that to a film remix stage. Ask the assistant who's pulling it in from the dialogue editor, the sound effects editors, multiple composers, all the cues, and the film. They're awesome. That's the level of skill. So, not to be like, whatever, you can't do it. You can, but it doesn't happen overnight. This is like, you have to have every little detail of the program embedded so that when you do something, you know what to check, because it's always trying to screw with you. It's always some group got disabled. Here's the crappiest part about this process for me was during tracking, we ran out of groups.
Oh, wow.
I ran out of groups during the tracking phase. During mixing, when I wanted to make a new group, I would have to erase an old group. It was the worst. I was not happy about that part of the process.
Wow.
Oh, and it's just because of the channel, the channel count, because I would create like an LR group and a left surround, right surround group. And, I wanted to pair things together. So do that times all the instruments and across. Eventually we ran out of groups, and I called Avid. I know some folks there, and they're just like, congratulations, good job. I'm like, no.
He sent you a plaque.
We're not going to fix this. Yeah, they're just like, we're not fixing this. Don't submit anything about it. This is your problem, not ours. I was like, oh, shit. So folders are key. Color coding is key. Double checking is key. Multiple screens is key, right? No chance not having multiple screens. No way. I know that we want to reduce reflections in the studio and stuff, but no way. No. My assistant, Andrew Chung, was the other editor with me on this project. And he did an amazing job. And I would very carefully walk him through all the potential pitfalls before any edits started. We got to watch this. We got to watch this. Make sure that happens. Make sure that happens. Take the extra 5 minutes every single time, because if we put a day into this and we go down the wrong path, we cannot retrace our steps. We have to start over. Save immense amounts of PTX files, like every half an hour, make a new one. Label it properly so you know when to go backwards. And eventually start committing things. Because once you've got it to a point, you're like, if I just commit this down, I can remove a whole bunch of variables of, like, let's say accidentally opening up an edit or, doing something silly. So consolidation is key at a certain point. If you're working with that many tracks, like keeping it all live all the time is like, well, why? I'm already happy with how it sounds. So just commit it so that now I can take that brain power out and have one less thing to check every time I do something.
Yeah, and I think something we should mention for folks who have not had really big sessions like this, it's a lot of information, but a lot of times it's a lot of information that all goes together. So, like, going back to when you were talking about the snare drums on the pendulum, it's like, yes, it was 130 tracks of snare drums, but really it was 13 snare drums. There's a lot of...
It's 13 performances.
13 performances, right. There's a lot of information because of the capture, but you start figuring out ways of putting things together and keeping it. But you have to be organized very intentionally with this kind of stuff. And if you start...
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
If you start organizing intentionally this way when you're working on small projects, it is a lot easier when you start working on large projects. It sort of comes naturally. So label things. Labeling, I would imagine was crucial for what you were doing. Yeah. There probably weren't enough colors.
Yeah, also, like, there weren't enough colors, but you when it is your own thing, you start to memorize where things are, and also find new, like, when you're pushing the technology, it's one of those moments where you're like, oh, someone's like, oh, did you know you can do this? And all of a sudden, like, this Pro Tools feature that you never cared about before. One thing Pro Tools is, I love the program. I love it. I think all DAWs have their place. I would love to see it done in another one, because then I could understand that DAW on a deep, 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 deep level. But like, Pro Tools facilitated this project in some ways. Like, it is such a deep program when you understand it, especially from an editing standpoint. Its editing abilities are very, very good, especially for contemporary music with playlisting. It's as good as it gets. And like that, those little details of understanding how to use that for file management, how to use that for creating safety nets for yourself, multiple playlists and things along those lines, and then documenting it. It'd be like, if I make a mistake, I can always go back to this playlist. So yeah, labeling, all that kind of stuff. But at a certain point too, I mean, there's no doubt at a certain point, something gets messy. And that's when, as long as you've done it all correctly, commit it, tuck that other folder away, and never look at it again.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Let's move away from your album and get more into sort of general Atmos approaches, philosophies, workflows. One of the things I wanted to ask you, we talked a little bit about some phase stuff early offline, not in here. Wide speakers. I know a lot of guys love the wides. You like the wide positions. Do you have any suggestions for folks who want to use that position, how to use them without creating problems in fold downs? Because sometimes when I listen to mixes that were mixed by other folks, I have a feeling that my 714 array is not meeting the creative intent of that original mix. So are there some best practices or tips or advice that you would give folks on how do you employ the wides successfully and not, have it fall apart with fold downs.
When we're delivering, like I know I said that I'm mixing in 916 and I didn't care, for a while, but I listen in 714 all the time. And I check 5.1 regularly. Those are very close by buttons. And the headphones, of course, as well. It's like because at the end of the day, it is our responsibility. Sure, it's fine as an artist and a producer to be like, no, this is what I like, this is what I like. Because as the engineer as well, I have a responsibility to the music on a technical level to ensure that it can fold down. I do think that with the wide positions, anytime we take something out of the front wall, especially if we're talking about stereo stems, which is common, whether we want them or not. I like stereo stems. I do. But sometimes I wish I had things more broken out, and sometimes I get them and sometimes I don't. Whenever you move something through the room, one of the first things that I think we both listen for is how it affects the phase relationship of that source. Because one of the things that happens with stereo stems is they were designed for that position. And if I pull it back into the room and it gets thin or it starts to fall apart, not happening. Just to serve the speakers? No. It either goes back or maybe I put it to the back. We have to look and create relationships that are working with phase, because if you have something in the room and it starts to get a little thin, it means that there's some sort of phase discrepancy. Something is out of phase or something is going, and then it's going to get worse on the fold down. It's going to disappear. It's not unlike when you sum to mono in a stereo mix, all the stuff that disappeared on you, you at least have to be aware that that's a factor. So it's like the same kind of relationship. So for me, I don't really put stuff there that doesn't sound good there. I also do think it's an opportunity, like mono stuff does really well in those positions because it is less complicated in terms of its relationship. With the wide position specifically, we have to remember that in the fold down, more than 50% of it, so I'm going to guess, if it's 68, whatever, there's math to figure this out, but it's probably about, it feels like it's about 70% of the energy goes right back to left and right. So if I put something in the wide sound surround speakers, I should assume that they will snap back or be mostly felt by the listener out of left and right. And so making sure that you check in 714, and if something's not happening, it's just like the stereo to mono check. You say, oh, why? Okay, maybe it's the wrong source to be there. Maybe I need to do something else. Maybe it's just the wrong place to put it because of a whole bunch of factors. So I think you're right. I think that checking phase and being aware and sensitive to phase issues is a big part of the orchestration of the song.
Yeah. So center channel, where do you land on center channel these days? Again, it's highly dependent.
When it comes to whether I like it or not, my record is like a full-on center channel record, and that the center channel is a must to have its full capabilities. And again, it's because I like it. It's also because I designed the orchestrations that way to have, the soloist or the lead melody coming out of there, the bass, the kick drum, it's all in there. Of course, it's also everywhere else because of the various things we've talked about. I did a cinema remix, a dedicated cinematic master for this record. And so when it's on a big screen, I've done some big theater playbacks. No center channel. Bad news. It's a big problem. It's not. It's like you're immediately like, yep, should have put something there. The left and right speakers are 40, 50 feet apart. There's no more phantom imaging. So all of those factors played a role. I think it's lovely. I think if you design the music appropriately and you mix around it, it sounds great. If you're delivered a stereo stem where the reverbs are baked in and the effects are baked in, collapsing it into the center channel collapses the phase. It usually makes it sound worse. So towing in a little bit, trying to get a little bit there, trying to create maybe a Haas effect or some other stuff. I do think that the LCR wall is powerful and the center channel can help to be a translation anchor. But there are times that I just, again, it's like what we said at the beginning of the conversation. There are times that even if I want to use it, it's not the right decision for the circumstance. I don't have the right material. it's just not the right vibe. Maybe the vocals are, for instance, like a hard LR kind of vocal double. Well, collapsing that, it's like, well, you're just killing the vibe. So the answer to solve these problems is to get more assets. If we could have the lead vocal as a separate thing from the reverbs, as and have as many layers as possible, then we would probably have more success more regularly of using it how we may or may not want to use it. There is also the challenge of headphone translation from the center channel. It's been there since the beginning. In binaural, essentially, it goes to an off position, right? Like there's basically it feels as though there's no extra ambience, which has an effect on its presence that is sort of sometimes can feel a little unnatural if it's not treated right. And in Apple Spatial, it has had its own journey from being way too loud to being way too quiet. To I think they continue to make great improvements every time they update the algorithm, and I think I'm very happy with how my mixes go out into the world that have center channel content now. But it did have a major effect early on because it wasn't balanced properly. And so I think a lot of people are a little shy about that risk. So I just think it's something that it is worth engineers getting used to, and it's worth engineers trying. But I also respect when it doesn't make sense. So I do it sometimes. I don't do it other times. If I have a choice, if I'm going to make music for the format, oh yeah, because it's a very, very powerful tool. It can do stuff, especially when you start to play back in larger environments. It's the key to it all. But even then, it in headphones, it can give like a little bit of a focus to something if you want to have it that way. So yeah, I mean, basically, like I'm all for it, but I'm not attached to it.
No, I think that's great. I think a lot of guys we are so used to hearing center material in this phantom center kind of thing. Sometimes when you take something that you're used to hearing that way, I think we've taken for granted all the phase problems that have been happening for decades, listening to things in there, so that sometimes when we put something right in the middle, all of a sudden, boy, that sounds weird. You have to adjust to it, I think. I think sometimes for me, like if I put something right in the center, and I do like using center channel, sometimes it does get smaller doing that, which I don't like. And the thing that I got from Bob Clearmountain was, divergence can be your friend in some of that kind of stuff. That's been my experience. But yeah, I encourage people to just try it and see what happens. If you can, I think taking a stereo stem, like a stereo drum stem, I've had mixed experiences trying to kind of pull the phantom center content and put it in the middle, whether it's folding down to mono, sometimes something like the Leapwing Center 1, sometimes that can help with some of that, but sometimes it's just weird. And if weird doesn't fit the music, then don't make it weird.
Exactly. I do think that, again, some of the limitations that us as mixers face are often linked to, well, the music was written and conceived and orchestrated and mixed all with a 2-channel delivery in mind, and the folks have perfected that 2-channel delivery to the best of their abilities. But 2-channel delivery comes with decisions. The playback format that we do things for forces decisions. It should. You have to make decisions. And so when we make those decisions and then try to put it into something else, there can be things that work and there can be things that don't. I had a mix this week where and this has happened to me many times, and I love it. The mixer just sent a frozen Pro Tools session. If I don't have a plugin, I will do a demo or I'll go buy a plugin. If I'm like, I should have had this one all along anyways. I have a ton of plugins. So I usually have almost everything, but there's always one or two.
Right.
So if I have the plugins, I'll unfreeze, like I'll read through, be like, oh yeah, I've got this. And if I make a mistake, I'm always saving new Pro Tools sessions as I go, so I can always go back and get the frozen track back. And now I can choose to make my own deliverables. I think it's awesome. It's like it's all there. I chose, perfect. I can keep the kick, I can keep the snare, but I can also take the stereo drum stem because it's been, there's 8 plugins on the bus. So like there's a bunch of stuff that made the sound that I need to maintain, but I can keep the kick and the snare. Well, I'm going to take the room mics, which actually were mixed super low in the mix, and I'm going to throw them in the back the way that they should have been if I was to do it from the source. The guitars. Okay, I've got the baked stem, but cool. There's actually 4 acoustic guitar layers in there. So I'll take the baked stem and then I'll take 2 of the other ones and or maybe you're like, you know what? I'm going to take the 4 separate guitars and yes, I'll have to reproduce all the stuff on the bus somehow, but it's worth it. Because the song is like based around acoustic guitars. Let me put the effort into like making a quad guitar arrangement. That was a win because a lot of times actually these pop sessions, it doesn't have to be pop music, but I'm describing a pop song. There's a ton of tracks. They're working on a ton of tracks. It's just that they too had to sum it down for top-down mixing. They had to sum it down for live stem delivery. So I thought the frozen session thing, again, it's happened to me many times, but it hadn't happened in a while. And I was like, oh, I love this. I took like an hour to just figure out my own deliverables. And then boom, I had like 80 layers to work with. Otherwise, probably would have been more like 20. And I could do all of these subtle little things. And I mean, they signed off on it. When it's out, I'll point to it maybe. But I think it turned out nice. So that could be a solution to the problem. Because the one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to go bother a mixer who's already on to their next song. I have even personally compensated some mixers in the past to be like, look, I don't have what I need and I just can't. I can't work with 4 stems. I'm not doing it. So what is it going to take? What's your assistance rate? I wish that, whatever, doesn't matter. I chose in that moment that was important to me. And I would be like, yeah, it's your time, right? I respect that. Yeah. It's your time, just like it's my time. So what's it going to take? And then usually they're like, oh, thanks so much. Like, that's really cool. I appreciate you caring. Yeah, my assistant's like $50 an hour and they'll do it in the off hours. I could have you a full stem out. It'll be like an hour's work and I'll have it for you tomorrow. Boom. I don't want to abuse somebody's time, but I do want to make the best mix I can.
That's a great idea. I had never thought about the frozen session. Like I've thought about asking for like, give me a committed multi-track. I think the frozen, that almost makes even more sense to me, just to make it even easier for somebody to just, because all you got to do is just select all the tracks and freeze them.
And of course, we're talking about, that's a personal decision. There's a lot of mixers who might be like, no, that's no one's business.
Right.
What is under the hood.
Oh yeah.
Again, totally respect that. Like,
absolutely.
This is where I think, again, the role of the spatial remixer, there's a little bit of an attitude that I think should come from the mastering engineer, I didn't master my record, of course. That's Michael Romanowski. I believe in the mastering engineer, being that separate set of ears, and I did even with my own project. But as a mastering engineer, one thing that you have to get good at is working with what you have, unless there's a dire emergency, because you have to trust that everybody has done their best and that what you've been given is the best. And it's actually an attitude that I think helps, is when you get a delivery, look at it as intentional and don't think, oh, this is what I would have done. This is why. That's the wrong attitude. When I get a stereo mix from someone as a stereo mastering engineer, the feeling I have for it is this is their version of perfect. And therefore I have an innate respect for it. And I'm going to do what I can to help it reach its potential, rather than, oh, you know what, I would have done this. That's the wrong attitude. I feel the same attitude when it comes to working on spatial remixes. If someone delivered me X, Y, and Z, it's there for a reason. There's a whole bunch of factors that have led to it. And my job is to now make that work, barring extenuating circumstances. Again, you get 3 stems. You're like, I can't I can't make anything out of this. It's better for us to not do this. That's the kind of thing where you go and you make the ask. But on the whole, I actually find the engineers at the higher levels of the industry are so talented and they're killing it. Their deliverables are better and better every year. And I work with a lot of the mixers, like we have relationships and they like what I do. And they're always like, oh man, I loved hearing the Atmos. Like, thanks for taking the time to make it sound great. And like, they also are, I think in the early days, they were frightened that they might go and the Atmos mix would be heard and it wouldn't be like theirs. And, we're all on the same team here.
Yeah. I think that is, it's something you can't say enough. Like that headspace, I think that was one of the best things that ever happened to me, was changing kind of my view of things to more of that, like getting away from the, oh, well, how am I supposed to fix this, to turning it into more of, it's like, well, how can we make this even better? How can we take the stuff that was done, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt that they have done things intentionally and they've arrived at this thing and they're happy where they're at. So it's like, okay, well, where do we go from here to make it better? And that was something that didn't, like the first half of my career, probably I was in a totally different headspace from that. But changing that, it made, if anything, it just made everything more fun.
Agreed.
We're kind of stuck in our own little world, and I do like actually working with people. So, to have that attitude, I think that's huge, and I think it can make a really big difference in what you're doing. I agree with that. Oh, I almost hate to ask this, but LFE. Do you have an opinion on LFE? What do you like using LFE for? What do you not like using LFE for?
I have a very strong opinion on LFE. I think that it is another speaker. It is an opportunity to create low frequency effects that augment a mix in a way that not having an LFE doesn't allow you to do. I don't think I don't personally do a crossover and feed it to it like it's an extension speaker, because that's not how the technology treats it. And that's not a way that's going to lead to the most common translation. So for me, I'm creating lower octave material for it all the time, or I'm finding something from the mix that can live there. Ultimately the LFE does make its way into our binaural folds. It does make its way, it doesn't make its way into like low row stereo folds. It does make its way into direct render. Although direct render is not really consumer experience. So realistically, like the fear of the low row fold and the LFE content not being there is always something. But like, yeah, for me, I am going to use the LFE if there's content that's in the bottom octave already, a bass, a kick, a piano, something that's already there that I feel like I can augment with low frequency effects. I'm never using it as a crossover point for a source. I don't use bass management in my mixing room. I'm not there right now, but it's all the Lipinski speakers and their full range. And so the LFE is a dedicated speaker for me, and I make dedicated content for it. I love it. I use it. I don't use it if there's nothing appropriate for it, but I use it when I can. But also I think I would hope that if someone was to take a mix that I did and turn the LFE off, it would still be like a very comparable experience, and in terms of like the intended low end. But then you turn it back on and be like, yeah, I'm going to just keep that on.
Nice. Yeah, I have a love-hate thing with it. I really want to use it. It's more low end, but I've had mixed experiences with it. Like, just successfully. I think it's with anything in audio production, you've got to put in time to figure stuff out and work with it. And, it's worth it. That LFE center channel, I think you put it in a very good way when you said it's an opportunity. And maybe that is the best way to look at all of this stuff. It's an opportunity. It's not something that's going to fit every use case. You know, we don't want to cram every song into the exact same box, because you wouldn't do that anytime. But these are opportunities that if it fits the material, if it fits from a creative standpoint, then yeah, why not? Let's do it. It's more
100%.
bottom. It's more bottom and it's more speakers. You know, you said it. More is more.
And I mean, more is more sometimes. And I'm a bass player. I literally
Oh yeah,
I've
that's
sat
true.
on stage. I own I sort of have an LFE as like an amplifier. You know, obviously they're more full range than that, but like, yeah, that feeling of, no, realistically, like the feeling of what a bass amp does when you're on a stage and you've got a nice like 12-inch cab or like a 212 behind you, 6 feet behind you, and it's vibrating the stage. That's the feeling that almost some of it's like haptic, right? Some of it is feel based. It's not even sonically based, which is why we can use that like 40 hertz and below very critically to make something happen. It's like, ooh. And yeah, if it's gone, then it's gone. If your speakers can't reach 40, it's not going to happen anyways.
Right.
You start getting into mixing stuff like aggressively 100 to 130 in the LFE. Yeah, you're asking for trouble because of the translation side. It might sound awesome in your room, but you have, when you start to think about the realities of people's LFEs in their listening environments, these have got to be the most untamed speakers in the whole system. There's no consistency about the tuning and how loud they are. There's movie mode. There's, everyone's got movie mode on, which is just a big boost for the LFE. So it's like, you take all this stuff into consideration. I don't think because a consumer's not using a technology right means we should like not do something, but we can consider, all of these things in the pursuit of translation.
I don't worry about what's going to happen on the consumer side too much. I mean, I can't say I don't think about it, but I mean, I've just been in people's houses and I've seen it all, and you can't.
Sure.
It's people are going to mess stuff up. That's not. I don't consider it my responsibility. Like I can't mix for their messed up system if they got it wrong. But the low end, like this was something we were noticing when I was at Auburn University recently, because I've been helping them with their studio down there, getting the Atmos side up and going. And after we had gotten, their ATCs all up and running, beautiful sounding rig, and you start going through different commercial releases, that low end, whether it's LFE or just in the mix, it played a big part in which songs were we going, that's great. And then we would pull something up and it didn't have the same bottom, and it was like, oh, I mean, that's good. Some of the catalog stuff. I mean, I'd pull up something that was a catalog Atmos release. It's material that's 40 years old. It was done as well as you can do it for that. But having, you listen to that and then you put on something with just a ton of modern, like deep low end. And it was like, which one did we pick as preferring? It's like we like the low end stuff.
Well, yeah, these are the Fletcher Munson curves, right? Like this, we can't ignore the psychoacoustic preferences that we have.
Right. Before we wrap this up, though, I want to ask you one more question. What do you think about the future of Atmos? What do you think about the sustainability of it? It's a question a lot of people have. Are you hopeful about it? Where are you at right now, do you think?
I I think that we are at a stage where we've reached a bit of a plateau in a good way, where Atmos has become, for most, this sort of extra spatial remix, extra deliverable, high fidelity, beautiful sounding, meaningful artistic expression of pre-existing music. That's not to say, however, that there's not a massive world all the way from including myself now, but tons of people making art for it. There's acousmatic composers, there's electroacoustic composers, there's contemporary composers, there's installation folks, there's people working in live sound, right? Immersive is in live. The film industry's always been there. I mean, again, we just have to recognize that when we start to see the ecosystem as a whole, including the future of technology with Apple and Google, who are, bringing spatial concepts into how they deliver audio. I mean, there's no doubt that there is a fundamental shift potential in terms of how audio is conceived. But specifically for music, right now, I think we're at a stage where the next step is artistic. I've wanted it since the beginning. Again, I literally made a record because of how badly I wanted it. And so it's just getting it down to the music, right? Getting it to the musical level, getting it in so that we're in the room producing with artists and helping to conceive of this when it's appropriate for their music. It's conceive of this three-dimensional aspect so that it is the artistic intent and not a reflection of a previous intent. I think that will have a massive impact because it will facilitate music in a way that is organic and that just is and doesn't need to be compared to anything else. That said, technologically, there's still many reasons to realize that immersive audio is for a significant period of time in the future is still, it is still a additional format in a stereo functioning world. And that's because stereo's got decades and decades of building infrastructure, all the way from how we think about music as composers to how we edit music on two speakers, how we use our DAWs, how we set up microphones. And I'm not in this to say one is better or worse. For me, I see the potential and creative potential in one. So I think it's important to remember that for those interested in the Atmos world is that we're at a place right now where I think if someone is genuinely like, oh, if I don't work in Atmos, I'm going to lose some money. That's a terrible reason to do this. It's not a good, I can't argue that there's enough work to sustain the kind of investment it is to build a studio that way. And also it's not a great attitude to approach most artistic things, but it's just certainly it's not like it's replaced stereo, and if you never do it, you're never gonna. That doesn't make any sense. It never made sense. Everyone who made those arguments had no basis for making them. It was all just clickbait crap. And so I was not happy when it was being said. There was no merit in it when it was being said. Stereo is still the backbone of our very infrastructure. And so I really think those going into immersive should be doing it out of a place of passion, a place of creativity, and a place of love for it. Because then they're going to be able to make something meaningful, because that's where music comes from. It doesn't come from checks. Sure, we should be compensated for our work, but good music comes from a deeper place than that. I think we're at a stage right now where there's a lot of people, yourself and myself included, who are invested in this. Many of us have been invested for a long time. And we just need to keep raising the bar on what we do, how we do it, making the music sound as good as freaking possible every time, and working with the artist teams, working with the labels, working with the producers to make sure that we just keep raising the bar and making the experiences better and better. What will happen after that? I don't know. There's a lot of people invested in this industry right now. And so I think that there's lots of space for some wicked stuff to be made. Again, we said this earlier. To tell someone you should make a financial investment of putting this many speakers in your studio. No, I'm not saying that at all. I don't know about you, but when I did it, it was a borderline inappropriate decision that I made.
It was totally inappropriate when I did it.
Logical, Totally inappropriate. There wasn't even an Atmos renderer. I remember when the speakers arrived at my house. Oh my gosh. They arrived in a FedEx truck, all these Lipinskis. And my entire family was on the porch. And anyone who's watching this, if anyone's watched this long in the video, we have something in common. We must. I wanted nothing more than my family to not be home that day and for me to be able to get those boxes into my studio, unpack them so it just wouldn't look so inappropriately gargantuan. Everyone was on the porch. 2 FedEx drivers drive up. Oh my God. It was like, and they're like, what? What just happened? This was 5 more Lipinskis, 2 Lipinski subwoofers, and 4 high channels. Like, these were big boxes. This was like, looked like someone was moving into a home. Most people, this is like what would fill their U-Haul. And they're like, what's happening right now? Like, at that stage, it was insane. I recognize it. I look back on it and I'm like, that was an insane thing to do. Like, I should talk to someone about why I convinced myself to make that decision. And so, like, I'm not going to sit here and say to anybody, like, this is a must. Even when I'm talking to my students, that is not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from, like you said with the LFE, this is an opportunity. And there are so many ways to engage with the opportunity, all the way from simple learning to being a listener, to being an engineer, to being in the live world, to being in the film world, to building installations. Go work for I was at Disneyland or at Universal Studios. Those are all immersive installations and all those rides. I mean, it's so much bigger than just remixing music. And so when we see it that way, there's a huge potential for someone to be involved in this industry. If you're specifically thinking, I want to remix this song by this one artist, it's like such a small niche within it. But because it's pop artists, like, that's the most famous stuff, right? It's the stuff we hear about. Of course, it's awesome. It's because they're awesome artists. But anyways, I hope I've articulated that point from a couple of different angles.
No, I think that's great. And, the thing I'll just mention right now, like, one of the things I've really enjoyed about helping out down at Auburn University is seeing students react to this, because you hear about, people are like, oh, kids don't care. It's like, well, when we get those kids in those rooms, they care. They love it. I mean, it is something else. But yeah, I've always, and I think a lot of it was just coming from my involvement in post-production and working with filmmakers and videographers and, video games and lives. I've done immersive mixing for live sound. There is a lot more to this than just what we can do in, like, a room like I'm in right now. Now, this is my preferred place to be right now anyways. I mean, that could change in a year or two. I may feel differently. But there is a lot more out there. And I'm excited about it. So, Justin, thanks so much for doing this. I'm going to put links to all of your stuff down below if people want to get a hold of you. We'll put stuff down there. We'll put some playlists and definitely a link to your new record. Everybody should go check that out. But thanks for chatting. This has been fun. I bet we'll do this again because it was long. And I know we haven't even like, that was like the tip of the iceberg, I think, for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got into, fortunately, it takes time, but we got into some stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this.